had always believed the Galactic Council's reports about humans. They were described as a primitive species, barely evolved beyond throwing rocks and shouting at each other. The blue-skinned officer had read the files countless times during his journey to the Outer Rim territories. Humans were classified as Level 3 beings, suitable only for basic manual labor and simple tasks that required no real intelligence. The transport ship Stellar Wind hummed quietly as it approached the mining colony of 442B, adjusted his breathing apparatus, and checked his plasma rifle one more time. This was supposed to be a routine inspection of the human work crews, nothing more than paperwork, and ensuring the mining quotas were being met. Captain, a veteran with scales that had dulled with age, briefed the inspection team in the main cargo bay. "Remember, these humans are unpredictable. They make strange noises when they work, and some of our previous inspectors have reported unusual behavior. Stay alert, complete the inspection, and we'll be back to the core worlds by next rotation." The other members of the inspection team nodded. There was another but with more experience dealing with primitive species. N, a massive whose thick hide could stop most small arms fire, served as their security chief. Finally, there was Dr. Law, whose telepathic abilities helped them communicate with species that hadn't developed proper translation technology. The shuttle bay doors opened with a mechanical whir and got his first look at a human mining operation. The colony was built into the side of a mountain, with massive excavation equipment carved into the rock face. Dust filled the air, and the sound of drilling echoed across the valley. Everything looked exactly as he'd expected from a primitive mining operation. What he hadn't expected were the humans themselves. The first human he saw was operating a piece of machinery that weighed at least 3 times what the operator did. The creature stood barely 5.5 feet tall, covered in dirt and sweat, but it moved with a precision that surprised. The human noticed their shuttle landing and waved, actually waved, as if greeting old friends rather than superior beings who held the power of life and death over the entire colony. "That one seems friendly enough," commented through their communication system. A human in cleaner clothes approached their group. This one walked upright with confidence that seemed almost arrogant for such a primitive being. "Welcome to station," the human said in surprisingly clear galactic standard. "I'm Sarah, the operations manager here. We've been expecting your inspection team." Dr. La stepped forward, her large, dark eyes focusing on the human's thoughts. After a moment, she looked puzzled. "Captain, I'm reading something unusual from this one. The thought patterns are more complex than the reports indicated." Sarah smiled and noticed that humans showed their teeth when they were pleased, rather than when they were threatening something. "Dr. Law, isn't it? We've heard about telepathic abilities. Fascinating stuff. Would you like to start with the main mining shaft, or would you prefer to see our living quarters first?" The inspection proceeded normally for the first few hours. The humans maintained their equipment properly, followed safety protocols that exceeded galactic standards, and seemed genuinely enthusiastic about their work. They asked questions about the inspection process, offered food and drinks that their biology could safely consume, and even showed them improvements they'd made to the mining operations without authorization. "We increased output by 12% just by adjusting the drill bit angles," explained a human named, whose dark skin gleamed with perspiration. "Turns out the geological surveys missed some inconsistencies in the rock density. My team figured out the optimal approach through trial and error." N looked skeptical. "You modified Galactic Council equipment without permission." Shrugged, another strange human gesture. "We made it work better. Isn't that what matters?" That evening, the inspection team gathered in their temporary quarters to discuss their findings, found himself troubled by what he'd observed. "Something doesn't match the reports," he told the others. "These humans are clearly more intelligent than we were told." "Intelligence and compliance are different things," Captain replied. "Intelligence can be dangerous if it's not properly guided." Dr. La had been unusually quiet during dinner. Finally, she spoke up. "I've been scanning human thoughts all day. What I'm finding is disturbing, but not in the way you might think. Their minds are incredibly active, processing multiple complex ideas simultaneously. They're not just following instructions, they're constantly analyzing, improving, and adapting." Leaned forward. "Are you saying they're planning something?" "No," Dr. La said slowly. "I'm saying they're thinking about everything all the time. Every human I scanned was simultaneously focused on their current task while also considering improvements, backup plans, potential problems and solutions I hadn't even thought of. It's exhausting just to touch the surface of their consciousness. Before anyone could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the colony. The inspection team rushed to the communications center, where they found Sarah coordinating with someone over the long-range transmitter. "What's happening?" Captain demanded. Sarah looked up from the communication console, and for the first time since they'd arrived, she looked worried. "Pirates! A raiding fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. 3 heavy cruisers and at least a dozen fighters. They'll be in weapons range within 2 hours." They were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless raiders who took no prisoners and left no survivors. Their ships were fast, heavily armed, and crewed by beings who had been born into a culture of violence and conquest. "We need to evacuate immediately," Captain said, moving toward their shuttle. "Our ship can't fight 3 cruisers." "Evacuate?" Sarah looked confused. "Captain, there are over 2,000 people in this colony. Your ship can't carry that many, and they will blow up anything that tries to leave the planet." "Then we take who we can and report the incident to the Council fleet," replied. "It's unfortunate, but these things happen in the outer territories." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned back to her communication console. "All section leaders, we have incoming hostiles, estimated arrival 2 hours. Begin implementation of Protocol 7 immediately." "What is Protocol 7? Asked. Who had just entered the communications center answered, "We fight back." The next few hours changed everything thought he knew about humans. Within minutes of Sarah's announcement, the entire colony transformed. Miners became soldiers, construction equipment became weapons platforms, and the peaceful mining operation became a fortress preparing for war. Humans moved with purpose and efficiency that impressed even N. Heavy mining equipment was repositioned to provide cover and create defensive positions. Power cells intended for drilling equipment were repurposed into improvised explosives. Most surprisingly, the humans seemed to know exactly what they were doing. "How do you know military tactics?" asked, who was helping to set up what looked like an anti-aircraft battery made from mining equipment. "Every human settlement in the outer territories has military training," explained while adjusting targeting sensors. "We volunteer for assignments out here knowing we might have to defend ourselves. The Council provides protection when they can, but sometimes you're on your own." Dr. Lowe approached them looking shaken. "I've been scanning the humans as they work. Their fear levels are off the charts. They're absolutely terrified." "They don't look afraid," observed. The humans around them moved with steady determination, following Sarah's orders and preparing defensive positions with calm efficiency. "That's what's so disturbing," Dr. Locke continued. "They're more afraid than any sentient being I've ever scanned, but they're still functioning perfectly. They're planning tactics, coordinating logistics, and maintaining morale while experiencing terror levels that would paralyze most species." A new voice interrupted their conversation. "Fear keeps you alive if you don't let it control you." They turned to see Sarah approaching with a human hadn't met before. This one was older, with gray hair and scars on his face that suggested previous combat experience. "This is Thomas, our security chief," Sarah said. "Before the colony, he served in the Human Defense Corps." Thomas nodded to the inspection team. "Ma'am, we've got the perimeter secure and weapons systems online, though we'll have to work for this one." "Weapons systems?" Captain looked around at the mining equipment and improvised defenses. "These aren't military weapons." Thomas smiled, and was beginning to understand that humans smiled for many different reasons. "Captain, humans have been turning tools into weapons since we invented tools. A mining laser can cut through ship hulls just as easily as it cuts through rock. A mining explosive can bring down a building or crack a raider's shields." The captain of the Stellar Wind contacted them as the fleet approached weapon range. "Captain, we're moving to a safe distance. The raiders haven't noticed us yet, but we can't provide support without revealing our position." "Understood," replied. He looked at Sarah. "Are you certain you won't evacuate the essential personnel?" "These are all essential personnel," Sarah replied. "This is our home." The first attack came exactly 2 hours after the initial warning. 3 massive ships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately began bombardment of the colony's surface installations. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking defensive positions and mining facilities with devastating accuracy. But the humans had been busy during those 2 hours. The main mining facility was a decoy. The real defensive positions were hidden in natural caves and underground tunnels that the humans had been expanding since the colony's founding. As soon as the orbital bombardment began, the humans disappeared underground and the real battle started. Found himself in a command bunker carved deep into the mountain, watching Sarah coordinate a defensive battle that should have been impossible. Humans throughout the colony reported their positions and status with calm professionalism that contradicted everything he'd been taught about primitive species. Section 4 reports successful shield disruption, one human announced. The mining charges worked perfectly. Section 7 has fighters in range, another voice reported, requesting permission to engage. Granted, Sarah replied. Remember, target their engines first. We want them disabled, not destroyed if possible. The battle raged for hours. They had superior technology, better weapons, and more experience with combat. But they had never fought humans before, and they didn't understand what they were facing. Humans used the terrain to their advantage, turning the mountain itself into a weapon. They collapsed tunnels to create, used mining equipment to create camouflaged weapon positions, and coordinated attacks with a level of tactical awareness that impressed even the experienced captain. Most importantly, they never gave up. "They are pulling back," Thomas announced during a brief lull in the fighting. "They're regrouping for another assault." "How many casualties?" Sarah asked. 17 wounded, 3 seriously. No fatalities yet. Dr. La looked amazed. "How is that possible? I've been monitoring the fear levels throughout the colony. Every human here should be catatonic with terror, but they're still fighting effectively." Sarah overheard the comment. "Doctor, fear isn't our enemy. Fear tells us we're in danger, which means we need to be smart. Panic is the enemy, and we train not to panic." The second assault was more coordinated and more vicious than the first. The raiders had learned from their initial mistakes and adapted their tactics, but so had the humans. "They're targeting our communication arrays," reported, "trying to isolate our sections." "Switch to backup systems," Sarah ordered, "and implement the surprise we've been saving." Watch the tactical display as something extraordinary happened. The humans had been quietly mining out a network of tunnels that connected every section of the colony. As the forces landed and began their ground assault, they found themselves fighting an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike hard, and disappear before retaliation was possible. But it was what happened next that made Truly understand what he was witnessing. An assault team had broken through the colony's outer defenses and was advancing toward the main bunker where the inspection team had taken shelter. Their weapons were military grade, their armor was top quality, and their tactics were proven effective against a dozen different species. They had never fought humans who were defending their home. The first warrior through the breach found himself facing, who was armed with nothing but a mining tool and absolute determination to protect the people behind him. That was bigger, stronger, and better armed. Attacked anyway. What followed was not a battle between superior and inferior beings. It was a demonstration of what happened when someone decided that their life was worth less than the lives they were protecting. Fought with a ferocity that shocked the warrior, using his knowledge of the terrain, his understanding of his opponent's equipment, and a willingness to take risks that no sane being would consider. Died in that corridor, but his sacrifice bought enough time for Thomas and his security team to arrive and drive back the assault. The third and final assault never came. Unknown to anyone in the colony, the captain of the Stellar Wind had been monitoring the battle and transmitting real-time reports to the Council fleet. A full battle group was already en route, but they wouldn't arrive for another 6 hours. The raiders had expected to overwhelm a primitive mining operation and strip it for valuables. Instead, they found themselves engaged in a costly ground war with an enemy that fought like demons and showed no signs of giving up. After losing 2 full assault teams and suffering damage to all 3 of their ships, the fleet commander decided the colony wasn't worth the cost. As the raider ships pulled back and jumped to hyperspace, a cheer went up throughout the colony. But it was a tired cheer, mixed with grief for those who had been lost. Stood in the main bunker, watching Sarah coordinate search and rescue operations with the same calm efficiency she'd shown throughout the battle. Dr. Lee approached him, her large eyes reflecting confusion and something that might have been awe. "I don't understand what I witnessed," she said quietly. "By every measurement we have, humans should have been paralyzed by fear or overwhelmed by superior forces. Instead, they fought more effectively than species with centuries of military tradition." Captain overheard her comment. "Perhaps our measurements are wrong," he said thoughtfully, "or perhaps we don't understand what we've been measuring." The Council battle group arrived 6 hours later to find the colony damaged but intact, and the raiders long gone. Admiral Ra, a distinguished officer, requested a full report on the engagement. "The humans successfully defended against a raid with minimal losses," Captain reported. "Their tactics were innovative." "Innovative how?" the Admiral asked. Paused, choosing his words carefully. "They used fear as a tactical advantage rather than allowing it to become a weakness. They adapted mining equipment into military weapons with remarkable efficiency. Most significantly, they demonstrated a level of unit cohesion and sacrifice that I've rarely seen in professional military units." Admiral Ra studied the battle reports for a long time. "Captain, are you suggesting that our classification of humans as Level 3 beings may be incorrect?" "I'm suggesting that we may not understand what we're looking at when we evaluate human capabilities," replied. 3 months after the raid, found himself assigned to the newly established Human Integration Assessment Team. The Galactic Council had decided that the events at 442b warranted a more thorough evaluation of human capabilities and their potential role in Council operations. The assignment took him to a dozen different human settlements across the Outer Rim territories. What he discovered challenged everything he thought he knew about civilization itself. On Europa Station, a research outpost orbiting Jupiter, humans had been working for 5 years to develop new mining techniques for gas-giant atmospheres. The project was considered a low-priority research assignment, suitable for letting humans practice with advanced technology under supervision. When arrived, he found that the humans had not only completed their assigned research, but had also developed 3 entirely new technologies that could revolutionize space-based resource extraction. "We started with the assigned project," explained Dr. Jennifer, the station's lead scientist. "But we kept running into problems that the original plans didn't account for, so we solved them." The problems Doctor referred to casually would have stumped research teams from most council species for years. Atmospheric pressure variations, electromagnetic interference from Jupiter's radiation belts, and complex gravitational effects from the planet's moons. The humans had approached each challenge as simply another puzzle to solve. "How did you overcome the electromagnetic interference issue?" asked, reviewing technical specifications that hurt his head to read. "We built a better shielding system," Doctor replied as if it were obvious. "The original design was adequate for the planned operations, but we needed something that could handle worst-case scenarios. So we designed something that could handle impossible scenarios instead." That phrase stuck with throughout his investigation. Humans didn't plan for worst-case scenarios. They planned for impossible scenarios and then figured out ways to make those plans work. On the agricultural world of New Montana, human farmers had transformed a planet with hostile soil and unpredictable weather patterns into one of the most productive food sources in the sector. The planet had been considered barely suitable for emergency rations production. Council agricultural experts had estimated that it might support a small population of hardy colonists who could grow enough food to survive. Instead, found vast farming complexes that fed 17 different worlds and produced surplus crops that were traded throughout the galaxy. When he asked the settlement coordinator, a weathered woman named Helen, how they had achieved such results, her answer was simple. "We wanted to do better." That wasn't a satisfactory explanation for a council report, so dug deeper. What he found was a systematic approach to problem-solving that seemed to be instinctive to humans. When they encountered poor soil, they didn't accept it as a limitation. They researched soil chemistry, developed new fertilization techniques, and bred crop varieties that could thrive in hostile conditions. When weather patterns threatened their crops, they didn't simply accept the losses. They built weather monitoring systems, developed drought-resistant irrigation, and created greenhouse environments that could protect essential crops. Most remarkably, they had done all of this while maintaining detailed records and conducting ongoing experiments to continuously improve their results. The new Montana Agricultural Database contained more useful research than most council agricultural centers produced in decades. "You're treating farming like a science project," observed. "Everything's a science project if you're doing it right," Helen replied. "Why would you do something the same way forever when you could figure out how to do it better?" Dr. Law accompanied on several of these inspection visits. Her telepathic abilities provided insights into human psychology that proved both fascinating and disturbing. After visiting 7 different human settlements, she submitted a preliminary report that caused alarm throughout the council hierarchy. Human consciousness operates fundamentally differently than any previously studied sapient species, her report began. Where most species demonstrate linear problem-solving approaches and acceptance of environmental limitations, humans exhibit what can only be described as aggressive curiosity. They appear to be incapable of accepting that a problem cannot be solved, and they treat every limitation as a temporary challenge rather than a permanent constraint. The report continued with observations that made council officials increasingly uncomfortable. Humans demonstrated creativity levels that exceeded artistic species, analytical capabilities that rivaled the most logical races, and persistence that surpassed even the notoriously stubborn. More concerning was their apparent ability to coordinate these capabilities across large groups without sacrificing individual initiative. Most species achieve coordination through hierarchical command structures or collective consciousness, Dr. Law had written. Humans achieve coordination through what they call shared purpose, while maintaining complete individual autonomy. This should be impossible, but they make it work through mechanisms I don't fully understand. The breaking point came during his visit to Titan Base, a research station in the Saturn system that had been established to study human behavior under extreme isolation conditions. The assignment was supposed to be a punishment detail, placing humans in an environment so harsh and remote that it would test the limits of their psychological stability. When arrived, he found that Titan Base had become the unofficial headquarters for long-range exploration planning. The humans stationed there had not only adapted to the isolation, but had used it as an opportunity to develop technologies and strategies for even more ambitious projects. "We're designing missions to reach other galaxies," announced Commander Singh during his briefing. "The isolation here makes it perfect for testing long-duration mission protocols." Stared at the commander, wondering if the isolation had finally affected her sanity. "Other galaxies? Commander, that would require journey times of millions of years, even with our fastest ships." "Yes," replied cheerfully. "So we need to figure out how to build ships that can operate for millions of years, and design mission protocols for crews that will live and die during the journey without ever seeing their destination." The technical specifications showed him were not the fantasies of an isolated mind. They were detailed, practical engineering solutions for challenges that most species would never even consider attempting. Humans on Titan Base had spent their isolation time working on problems that wouldn't need to be solved for thousands of years, simply because they found those problems interesting. "Why are you planning for missions that your species won't launch for?" asked. "Someone needs to think about these things," replied. "If we don't start planning now, we'll never be ready when the time comes." Dr. Law pulled aside after the briefing. "I've been scanning the humans here for the past 3 days," she said quietly. "Their isolation stress levels are virtually non-existent. They're psychologically healthier than most humans living in major population centers." "How is that possible?" "They're doing work that they find meaningful," Dr. Law explained. "For humans, purposeful activity seems to overcome almost any environmental hardship. They're not just surviving the isolation, they're thriving in it because it lets them focus on long-term projects without distraction." That evening, found himself in the observation deck of Titan Base, looking out at Saturn's rings while trying to write his preliminary report. How could he explain to the council that humans weren't just more capable than initially assessed, but that they thought about problems in ways that other species couldn't even comprehend? Commander Singh joined him at the observation window. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, looking out at the cosmic vista. "Sometimes I think we're the luckiest species in the galaxy. We get to see all of this and dream about what's beyond it." "Aren't you concerned about the dangers of space exploration?" asked. "The radiation, the distances, the isolation, the 1,000 ways that missions can fail." Considered the question seriously. "Of course. Fear of those dangers is what keeps us alive during missions like this, but fear of danger isn't the same as fear of attempting something difficult. If we only did safe things, we'd never leave our home planet. But space exploration is inherently dangerous. Many missions fail and crews are lost. Yes, agreed. And every time we lose a crew, we learn something that helps us save the next one. The crews that died exploring space made it safer for the crews that came after them. That's how progress works. Was beginning to understand why humans had succeeded in environments where other species failed. They didn't view danger as a reason to avoid action. They viewed it as a problem to be solved through better preparation and smarter execution. His understanding deepened when the emergency alert sounded. Long-range sensors are detecting a distress signal, announced the communications officer. Council Research Vessel Scientific Endeavor is reporting catastrophic system failures approximately 12 hours away at maximum acceleration. Commander Singh immediately moved to the command center. What's their status? Life support failing, propulsion offline, communications intermittent. They're drifting toward Saturn's rings on a trajectory that will destroy the ship in approximately 18 hours. Check the rescue protocols. The nearest Council rescue ship is 36 hours away. They won't reach the scientific Endeavor in time. Then we'll have to handle it ourselves, said matter-of-factly. Commander, Titan Base doesn't have rescue ships. We have research vessels that aren't designed for emergency recovery operations. Looked at him with the same expression he'd seen on Sarah's face at 442B. It was the look humans got when someone told them something was impossible. We don't have rescue ships, she agreed, so we'll have to build one. What followed was 8 hours of the most intense improvisation had ever witnessed. The humans at Titan Base stripped components from 3 different research vessels, redesigned their propulsion systems on the fly, and created a makeshift rescue ship that could reach the scientific Endeavor with barely an hour to spare. The modifications we're making have never been tested, warned Dr. Martinez, the station's chief engineer. We're essentially rebuilding the ship's entire power system based on theoretical calculations. Will it work? Asked. Probably. Probably isn't good enough for a rescue mission, interjected. Dr. Martinez looked at him with confusion. Probably is the best we can do with the time we have. If we wait for certainty, the crew of the scientific Endeavor will be dead. Made the decision that would remember for the rest of his life. We launch in 1 hour. Dr. Martinez, implement your modifications. Doctor, calculate the most efficient intercept course. Lieutenant, prep the ship for emergency acceleration. Commander, said urgently, you're risking the lives of everyone on this rescue mission to save a crew that might already be dead. Paused in giving orders to look at him directly. If we don't try to save them, they're definitely dead. If we do try, there's a chance we can save them and a risk that we'll die trying. Those aren't equivalent outcomes. The rescue mission launched exactly 1 hour later with Commander Singh, Dr. Martinez, and 2 other humans aboard the hastily modified research vessel. Insisted on joining the mission, partly from duty and partly from a growing need to understand how humans made decisions under pressure. The 8-hour journey to reach the scientific Endeavor taught more about human psychology than months of formal observation. The modifications to the ship were holding, but just barely. Power fluctuations threatened to shut down life support, the improvised propulsion system was operating beyond safe parameters, and long-range communications had failed completely. Any rational crew would have turned back. Engine efficiency is down to 60%. Dr. Martinez reported during the 6th hour of the journey. If we continue at current acceleration, we'll reach the target with about 20 minutes of power remaining. 20 minutes to execute a rescue operation and return to safe distance from Saturn's rings, asked. 20 minutes total before all ship systems fail. Waited for the logical decision to abort the mission. Instead, asked, can you give me 25 minutes? Possibly. I'd need to reroute power from life support. Do it. Commander, that means we'll be operating on backup air for the final hour of the approach. Then we better not waste time. Dr. La had joined the rescue mission to monitor the psychological effects of extreme stress on human decision-making. As the ship continued toward its target despite increasingly dangerous conditions, She reported observations that contradicted everything known about survival instincts. "Their fear levels are enormous," she whispered too. "Every human on this ship is absolutely terrified, but their fear isn't of the mission, it's of failing the mission. They're more afraid of letting the scientific Endeavor crew die than they are of dying themselves." The rescue itself was a masterpiece of desperate improvisation. The scientific Endeavor was indeed drifting toward Saturn's rings, its crew of 12 conscious but unable to maneuver their damaged ship. The Titan base rescue vessel had exactly one chance to match trajectory, transfer the survivors, and escape before both ships were destroyed. Commander Singh executed the rescue with precision that seemed impossible under the circumstances. With power failing and time running out, she brought the modified research vessel alongside the damaged ship, coordinated the transfer of 12 survivors, and began the escape maneuver with less than 10 minutes of power remaining. They escaped Saturn's gravity well with 47 seconds to spare before total system failure. During the 18-hour journey back to Titan base on emergency power, interviewed the survivors from the scientific Endeavor. Their ship had suffered a cascade failure of primary systems that should have been impossible according to safety protocols. The crew had spent 16 hours believing they were going to die. "What did you think when you detected the rescue ship?" asked the scientific Endeavor's captain, unnamed. "I thought humans had come to save us," replied. "I've heard stories about their rescue operations. They have a reputation for attempting impossible missions." "Did you think they would succeed?" Consider the question carefully. "I thought they would try. With humans, that's usually enough." 6 months after the Titan base rescue, stood before the full Galactic Council Assembly to present his final report on human capabilities. The Great Chamber on Prime contained representatives from 47 different species, each of whom had read his preliminary findings with varying degrees of skepticism and concern. "The evidence suggests," began, "that our initial classification of humans as Level 3 beings was not merely incorrect. It was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how to evaluate their capabilities." Counselor K of the Dominion interrupted immediately. "Officer, are you seriously suggesting that a species that hadn't achieved faster-than-light travel until we gave it to them should be reclassified as equals to civilizations that have existed for?" "Respected counselor, I'm suggesting that our classification system may not be adequate to evaluate human capabilities," replied carefully. "Humans don't develop technologies the same way other species do. They don't view limitations the same way other species do. Most importantly, they don't respond to fear the same way other species do." He activated the holographic display system and began presenting the evidence he had gathered. Images from the 442B defense, technical specifications from Europa Station, agricultural data from New Montana, and rescue footage from the Titan base mission. In every scenario we observed, humans demonstrated capabilities that exceeded their supposed technological and cultural level. But more significantly, they demonstrated these capabilities specifically in situations that would paralyze most other species with fear. Counselor Na, representing the collective, leaned forward in her seat. "Dr. Law's psychological evaluations support these observations. Human fear response patterns are unlike anything in our databases. They experience fear more intensely than most species, but instead of being debilitated by it, they seem to use it as a motivational tool." "That makes no sense," declared Counselor Orr of the Federation. "Fear is a survival mechanism designed to prevent dangerous behavior. How can a species use fear to motivate dangerous behavior?" Dr. Law, who had been invited to present her findings, stood to address the assembly. "Honorable counselors, human fear serves a different function than fear in other species. Most species experience fear as a signal to avoid danger. Humans experience fear as a signal to prepare for danger. Their phrase, courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite fear, appears to be a fundamental psychological principle rather than mere philosophy." She activated a series of brain scan images showing human neural activity during stressful situations. These scans were taken during the 442B battle, the Titan base rescue mission, and several other high-stress scenarios. Notice that the fear response is not suppressed or reduced. It's channeled into enhanced cognitive function, improved coordination, and increased determination. Counselor Raw of the Federation studied the data with obvious skepticism. "Dr. Law, These readings suggest that humans actually perform better under extreme stress. That contradicts everything we know about cognitive function during crisis situations. Yes, counselor, that's exactly what the data shows. The chamber erupted in multiple conversations as representatives discussed the implications among themselves. Admiral Ra, who had investigated the raid aftermath, requested permission to address the assembly. Honored counselors, I have reviewed the tactical data from the 442B engagement extensively. The human defense of that colony was not simply brave or determined. It was strategically and tactically superior to what our own military academies would have recommended for the same scenario. He displayed a three-dimensional tactical recreation of the battle. The humans anticipated tactics that our intelligence services didn't know they possessed. They improvised countermeasures for weapons systems they had never encountered. Most remarkably, they maintained unit cohesion and communication effectiveness while under bombardment that should have reduced their coordination to chaos. Are you suggesting that untrained human civilians are superior to Council military forces? Counselor K asked, with barely concealed anger. I'm suggesting that trained human civilians defended a position that our tactical experts believed was indefensible, against an enemy that our military considered overwhelming, using resources that our strategists would have deemed inadequate. The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued about the implications of upgrading human classification, the potential risks of giving humans access to advanced technologies, and the precedent it would set for evaluating other species. Finally, Counselor Prime called for order. Officer, your recommendation. Had spent months preparing for this moment. Honorable counselors, I recommend that humans be reclassified as Level 1 beings with immediate access to advanced Council technologies and full membership privileges. The chamber fell silent. Level 1 classification was reserved for species that had demonstrated technological sophistication, cultural stability, and strategic value to the Council. It had never been granted to a species less than 3 centuries after first contact. Furthermore, continued, I recommend that the Council establish a human integration core with the specific purpose of studying human problem-solving methodologies and adapting them for Council-wide implementation. You want us to learn from humans? Counselor or asked incredulously. Respected Counselor, in 6 months of observation, humans have solved technological problems that have challenged Council scientists for decades, defended against military threats that have defeated professional armies, and rescued personnel from situations that our protocols classified as hopeless. If we're not learning from them, we're making a serious mistake. The final decision would require a full vote by all Council members, a process that could take weeks. But's presentation had clearly shifted the debate. Even skeptical representatives were asking detailed questions about human capabilities rather than dismissing them outright. During the recess, Dr. Law approached in the assembly lobby. Do you think they'll approve the reclassification? I think they're afraid not to, replied. The data is too compelling and the strategic implications are too significant to ignore. 3 weeks later, the vote was announced. By a margin of 31-16, the Galactic Council voted to reclassify humans as Level 1 beings and establish the Human Integration Corps as a permanent Council organization. Was appointed as the first director of the Integration Corps, with orders to establish formal cooperative programs between human settlements and Council operations throughout the galaxy. His first assignment was to return to 442B and offer Sarah a position as strategic advisor for defensive operations. When he arrived at the mining colony, he found that the humans had spent the months since the raid improving their defensive capabilities and expanding their mining operations. We figured they might come back, Sarah explained as she showed him the new defensive installations. So we decided to be ready for them. The improvements were remarkable. The humans had built a defensive network that could have resisted a full fleet action. More impressively, they had done it while simultaneously increasing mining output by 40% and establishing trade relationships with 6 different Council worlds. Sarah said, the Council would like to offer you a position as strategic advisor. You would work with military commanders throughout Council space, teaching them the defensive techniques you developed here. Sarah looked thoughtful. Would I be able to bring some of my team? The council is hopping, you'll bring your entire team. We want to understand how you coordinate operations so effectively. It's not complicated, Sarah replied. We trust each other, we communicate clearly, and we don't give up when things get difficult. That simple explanation contained the key insight that had taken months to understand. Human effectiveness wasn't based on superior technology or advanced training. It was based on psychological and social capabilities that other species had never fully developed. During his first year as director of the Human Integration Corps, established cooperative programs that revolutionized council operations. Human agricultural techniques increased food production across 17 worlds. Human engineering innovations improved the efficiency of mining operations throughout the galaxy. Human rescue protocols saved thousands of lives in emergency situations that would previously have resulted in total losses. Most significantly, human approaches to problem-solving began to change how other species thought about challenges and limitations. The breakthrough came during the crisis, when a rogue asteroid threatened to destroy the colony world of Nu with its 8 million inhabitants. Council evacuation protocols could save perhaps 10% of the population before impact. Traditional deflection technologies were inadequate for an asteroid of that size and velocity. The human solution was characteristically impossible. Instead of trying to deflect the asteroid, they proposed to break it apart using a network of synchronized explosions that would scatter the fragments in directions away from Nu. The plan required precise timing across dozens of detonation points, coordination between multiple ships operating in extreme conditions, and mathematical calculations that pushed the limits of Council computing capabilities. The margin for error is essentially zero, the Council's chief scientist reported. If any element of the plan fails, the fragments could cause even more damage than the original asteroid. So we don't fail, replied Commander, who had been promoted to head of Human Emergency Response Operations. The mission succeeded with less than 6 minutes to spare before impact. The asteroid was broken apart and scattered safely, saving Nu and its 8 million inhabitants. More importantly, the mission demonstrated that human approaches to crisis management could be systematized and taught to other species. Dr. La, now serving as chief for the Integration Corps, published her definitive study on human psychology 6 months after the mission. Her conclusions fundamentally changed how the Council understood intelligence, capability, and potential. Human consciousness operates on the principle of problems exist to be solved, she wrote. While most species accept limitations as permanent constraints, humans view them as temporary obstacles. This isn't mere optimism, it's a cognitive framework that allows them to identify solutions that other species literally cannot see. More significantly, humans have developed social structures that amplify individual capabilities through cooperation without sacrificing individual initiative. They achieve collective intelligence while maintaining individual creativity, a combination that should be psychologically impossible, but which they make work through mechanisms we're still studying. 2 years after the Council vote, stood in the observation deck of the new Integration Corps headquarters, orbiting Earth itself. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the blue and white planet that had produced a species capable of changing the entire galaxy's approach to problem-solving. Sarah, now serving as the Council's Director of Strategic Innovation, joined him at the observation window. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking about fear," replied. "Before I met humans, I thought fear was something to be overcome or avoided. You taught me that fear is information, data about dangers that need to be addressed rather than emotions to be suppressed." "Fear keeps you alive," Sarah agreed, "but only if you use it properly. What I still don't understand is how humans learn to use fear as a tool, rather than allowing it to become a limitation." Sarah considered the question while looking down at Earth. "Maybe it's because we learned early that the universe is full of things that want to kill us. Fear of those things is rational and appropriate, but fear of trying to survive them is counterproductive. So you choose to be afraid of the right things." "We choose to be afraid of giving up," Sarah replied. "Everything else is just a problem to be solved." Understood, then, why the Council had been wrong about humans for so long. They had measured human capabilities by comparing them to other species, using evaluation criteria that missed the most important aspects of human psychology. Humans didn't avoid fear, they partnered with it. They didn't accept limitations, they treated them as starting points for innovation. Most importantly, they didn't view challenges as obstacles to be overcome, but as opportunities to become something more than they were before. The Galactic Council had gained more than a new member species. They had gained access to a way of thinking that could transform every aspect of civilization. Problems that had seemed unsolvable for centuries were being addressed with human-inspired approaches. Technologies that had stagnated for decades were advancing through human innovation. Most significantly, other species were learning that limitations they had accepted as permanent were actually just challenges that no one had solved yet. As watched Earth turn slowly beneath him, he reflected on the title he had chosen for his final report to the Council. I learned the meaning of fear the day I fought beside humans. Fear, as humans understood it, wasn't the enemy of progress. It was the foundation of wisdom. True courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. And the greatest discoveries weren't made by those who avoided challenges, but by those who ran toward them with clear eyes and determined hearts. The universe was still full of dangers, problems, and limitations. But now, for the first time in galactic history, there was a species that looked at those challenges and asked not, how do we avoid this, but how do we solve this? And that, realized, made all the difference in the galaxy.